Good morning, and you're very welcome to this morning's Signpost webinar. The Signpost series is brought to you in conjunction with Food Drink Ireland, Dairy Sustainability Ireland, and National Rural Network. My name is Pat Murphy, Head of Environment Knowledge Transfer with Teagasc. And this morning, I'm delighted to be joined by Owen Carton and Cathriona Foley, both involved in the Comeragh Upland programme. Cathriona, you might just give us a quick idea of what's involved in the programme.
So we secured funding for an EIP project. It's with a discussion group that I've been working with for a number of years. So it was just to focus on the Comeragh Mountains and the ecology of the mountain, a learning project for the farmers in which they engaged with us and other experts for 25 days. So it was something new, and the farmers put a lot of time into it.
And it was one of the new small EIP programs that were announced by the government there about a little over a year ago, is it?
Yeah, a little over a year ago. So it was a short project, and the main basis was educational for the farmers.
Okay. Owen, how did you get dragged into this?
Catherine Keena is to blame. Absolutely, no question about it. I was happy as Larry until she came along. But it's absolutely a great project to be involved, Pat, because in some ways, when I think about it, I think about country roads take me home, because my mother is from Comeragh, right? And I spent time on her family farm, and I had an uncle farming over in Kilrossenty, right? And this is where I got my interest, on those two farms in agriculture. And I suppose I remember walking up Coomshanon in 1959. I know I'm dating myself a little bit there, but I hope you're all bad at sums. Anyway.
Very good. Well, listen, without further ado, I might let you start, because I think you have a really great story to tell, and a really informative story. So if you want to share your presentation there, and fire ahead.
So thanks for the introduction there, Pat. My name is Cathriona Foley, and I'm a dry stock advisor based in Dungarvan, County Waterford, and I'm the facilitator of the Waterford Hill Sheep discussion group that put this project together. So I'm just going to give you a brief introduction of how the project came about. So this is the project team. It consists of 14 farmers, myself, Catherine Keena, Michael O'Donoghue is our expert on history, geology and place names, and Owen Carton, our project manager. And this is a picture of us on one of our trips up to Glenwherry in County Antrim. So the farmers are involved in 10 Comeragh uplands. 6 of them are commonages, farmed in common, and there's 4 privately owned uplands. They're covering 4,500 hectares, of which 3,000 of those hectares are within the Comeragh Mountain Special Area of Conservation. There are 6,300 hectares within the Comeragh Mountain SAC. So you can see here on this map, the mountains stretch from Glenwherry up here in beside Clonmel, all the way down through the middle of the county, down to Comeragh, which is the nearest mountain to Dungarvan. So the 10 uplands are spread across the whole mountain range. And you can see in this map down here that the boundary of the actual SAC is a lot smaller than the whole mountain range. So some of the mountains are outside the SAC, and others then might be only half in it, or maybe just the top of them might be in it. So in 2014, the NPWS issued a report that the Annex 1 habitats on the mountains, when they looked at 37 monitoring stops within the 8 habitats, all the 8 habitats were assessed as unfavorably bad. And I suppose this was something as well that I was finding hard to see. And I suppose I, as an advisor coming through the project, learned an awful lot. And it led me to look deeper at the mountains as well. So for anyone who's unfamiliar with the discussion groups, a discussion group is something that is when a bunch of like-minded farmers come together to discuss production. And it's generally a sheep, dairy or beef based. We advisors act as the facilitator within the group, facilitating the conversation and organising the meetings. And sometimes we get in guest speakers. So the Waterford Hill Sheep Discussion Group was formed in 1999 by Paddy O'Brien, and its foundation in the group was the production of the Light Hill lamb. So even back as far as this bunch of farmers were having a conversation about the mountain, but it wasn't to do with the habitats, it was to do with the production on the mountain. And they were talking about that if the sheep was coming off the mountain in bad nick, if there was too many sheep up there, well, then they would have to put more inputs into her to get her right again. So their costs of production were going up if they weren't farming their mountains right. I've been working with this group since 2015, and this project started when a farmer asked at a discussion group meeting, what is an EIP? So from there, we got Catherine Keena in as a guest speaker to one of our meetings. We visited the Suez EIP project in 2020, and this created awareness within the farmers of what other uplands were doing with EIPs. So we were left with two questions after that. How can we improve the profile of the Comeragh in upland circles? How can we get the name out there with the Comeragh Mountains that our mountains were important too? And what challenges were we facing and what do we need to do? So in the spring of 2021, the Department of Agriculture put out a call for a Eurovision Innovation Partnership scheme application. There was a COVID lockdown going on at the time. So we pulled 5 names out of the hat of the farmers, 5 of them to represent the bunch of the 14 farmers. And we all met together maybe 5 or 6 times over Zoom for a couple of hours to try and put the application together. And this is when Catherine Keena introduced us to Owen Carton, who was giving us some assistance in putting the application together, and Owen eventually became our project manager. So we began a discussion about what issues we might consider in the project. The main one that stayed with us all the time was an ecologist and getting the upland assessed. From the very beginning, the farmers were saying, right, we know the mountains are protected, we know the mountains are important, but we don't really know why. Like, what's up there? What are we protecting exactly? One farmer said at one meeting, had any of the other farmers grouse? He said, there's supposed to be grouse up there. I've never seen one. I would have thought I'd have stepped in a nest at this stage, but I don't know what a nest looks like. I wouldn't know their tracks. Will someone come and show us what's up there? So that's where that bit came from. Burning was there from the very start. Now, we dropped it for a while, but it ended up going back in at the end. It is a very controversial topic, but it does need to be addressed. And then there was a list of others. We mentioned drones, we mentioned fencing a lot, bracken control, genomics and breeding of sheep. There was a trip to Scotland mentioned and a helicopter even at one stage. So we managed to secure 118,000 funding for a 13-month project. We were after getting a brief extension due to the sudden passing away of one of our members, Willie Fraher, who was a great supporter of this project. We started work in July 2021. We have almost 95% of it complete with one site visit left to do. We're hoping to go up in September to the Pearl Mussel project and the Wild Atlantic Nature, and then just the write-up and the reporting to be completed. So I'll hand over to you now, Owen.
Okay, just give me 1 minute here, and I got this screen here. Okay, can you see that? Are we okay?
Yes, on.
Okay.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, so thank you, Catriona. And I want to start with the 3 innovations or pillars that we built our project around. And the first one was that
Sorry, Owen, I'm still seeing your unless I'm seeing something different, I'm still seeing your
No, you're right, Pat. Yeah.
I'm not seeing the slideshow, I'm seeing the full PowerPoint system.
Okay, I'm going to stop and start again.
Yeah, perfect.
Now, have you got me?
Yeah, go fire ahead there.
I know.
Are we okay?
No, you're not on full screen.
Not on full screen yet.
Why is that? This is what we didn't. No. Well, listen, I'm going to go ahead with this one if you don't mind.
Yeah, the other option would be to let Catriona share it and move it for you. You both have the same presentation, I think.
No. We if I can stick with this, Pat, I think it might be best.
Okay.
Because the first thing is we have three. Why am I doing? Oh yeah, begin. We have three project innovations. The first was that biodiversity is part of the natural capital and heritage of the mountain. And we didn't want to treat biodiversity in isolation. Our second innovation was that we were inspired by Brendan Dunford and the Burn Project, is that we wanted to engage and win over the hearts and minds of the farmers, because when you have that, when they know what they want, why they want to do it, what they want to do, and what they're trying to achieve, you stand in a much better position of actually achieving your outputs. And the final innovation or pillar was inspired by Gwyn Jones, who published a paper, distributed a paper there, a discussion document about bringing farmers and rural communities together to deliver bigger and better outcomes. So from that, we built our project around three objectives. The first was developing training for the farmers, and because there is no training for upland farmers. As I said, we wanted to integrate it into the biodiversity habitat training to be integrated into the cultural and natural heritage, and we wanted to engage the local rural community in the project and training. So to skip kind of fast forward to our main project outcomes, the evidence showed that our training approach built our farmers' capacity. We hope that it might provide a template for future upland training courses. And the discussion group model provided an excellent forum for learning, right? You know, Catriona was talking about that, and it really does work, that forum of people able to talk together. Interagency cooperation was required, for actually essential for the delivery of our project. And our engagements with the rural communities were empowering for the farmers. There was a couple of issues arose for us. And the first one is, like in all of life, more and better and honest communications are required between the actors. The conservation targets for some of our habitats, I think we need to have, what are the options? We need to have some discussion about that. And I think when you look at what we're trying to do, you know, we ask ourselves the question, is our knowledge base up to the task of delivering these new services from the uplands? And there's certainly no doubt that we need a new research, knowledge transfer and demonstration program for the uplands. And I suppose the final issue was arising is, what role, our potential role, could the next round of EIPs playing in achieving or addressing some of these issues? Going back to the Comeragh itself, they're a glacial landscape of national importance. They began their formation 400 million years ago, and with faulting and folding going on. And then if we come fast forward to about 1.5 million years ago, what was there at that time then, it's reported there were over 25 ice ages happened up to about 12, the last one about 12,000 years ago. And that sculpted the mountain and gave us that unique and actually beautiful landscape that the Comeragh provide. Now, the management of uplands, and I suppose we're talking about marginal areas as well, right, doesn't deliver, right, the returns from food production is not enough to make it viable. So, but there are new opportunities emerging, right? And these new ecological services like water supply from the uplands, flood control on the uplands, a lot of talk about carbon sequestration at the moment, public health and recreation, biodiversity and habitats. And in addition, our results-based RBAPs, results-based agricultural payment schemes, have emerged and are emerging in the new acres, and they kind of provide a new opportunity to develop a multifunctional uplands. But the delivery of these new services from the uplands is going to require new knowledge and management. So our project was about preparing farmers to take ownership and engage in delivering biodiversity and habitat outcomes with community engagement. It's very important at this stage to say there was 34 people listed here who, with a whole wide range of skills, who right throughout the project inspired us, supported us, and encouraged us. And what we want to say is a big thank you to you guys, because without you, we wouldn't have been able to deliver the project. If we go back to the start of the project, the first thing we did was to kind of say, well, where are we starting from? And we did an assessment through a little survey where we sat down and did it all together. And what we found was that the farmers, the discussion group members' knowledge of biodiversity and habitat was assessed as poor. They knew a bit about upland management, but it was fairly focused on production. And they knew a lot about the landscape, because I suppose they're up there walking that landscape every week. As Cathriona said, we're now at the end of the project, and we're putting together this project report. And it's a very important report, we believe, because it is written in part by the farmers. In other words, the farmers have written stuff that's included in this report. And then the experts who helped us and ourselves, the project team, wrote the other sections. But the main thing is that we want the farmers to feel that they have and know that they have ownership. This is their report, not somebody else's. Its purpose is to provide backup information to what we did during the training course and to provide project legacy. So I'm going to go down through these various sections and tell you what we did. The first section, this was the introduction. It was written by farmers, and we asked them to tell us their story of their upland and their commonage. And they wrote them down, and we typed them up, and they're included in the report. We also asked them if they could draw a rough map of their upland and mark out the place names on it. And they did that. So what we've got is this, in this introduction, the farmers report, which gives them hopefully ownership of it. And it's a family legacy, because in this section here, there was memories, living memories happening. If we go on, you know, that there was strong themes, and probably one of the biggest and strongest was how the mountain and farming it makes them are part of what and who they are. So there's that strong tradition of farming on the mountain comes out really strong in all the reports. It was interesting to note back in the 60s, wool was the major output. That's where the farmers and their families made the money. Whereas now we're looking at lamb production, as Cathriona mentioned there in the introduction. There's lovely stories about gathering and shearing sheep together, right? And these were in gentler times, you know, when time wasn't moving as fast as it is today. And people got together and worked together. And there was, you know, all of them mentioned a bit of crack associated with that. The impact of snow was a big issue for the mountains. And when you think about it, if you get snow on the mountains, the sheep are in trouble up there, and it's very hard to get up there and follow them. There was one event that kind of caught my eye, and it was on one of the things was about 1947 snow. And what it said, it was talking about prior to that, there were people living on the mountain, right? In houses on the mountain that had flocks. In 47 snow, those flocks were very decimated, really, and they left the mountain, and they were the last people living the mountain. There's a bit of history repeating itself there in the Comeragh. So the next section in the report is on geography and place names. How do we do it? We walked and we talked. And Michael O'Donoghue here, who Cathriona said was our project geographer, Gaelgore, he's an upland walker, and he's a passionate interest in the Comeragh Mountain. So we were very lucky to have Michael as part of our project. And what he did was he went up, walked the 10 commonages, and 6 commonages and 4 upland with the shareholders and the owners, and they shared their knowledge, right, of the landscape and the place names. And when we were finished that, Michael came down and Michael wrote a section for the report on the geography. And this is a map. So where he described the feature, he marked it out where he was talking about it on the map. He did exactly the same with place names, wrote up the section and marked out where the place names are on it, and also gave an explanation of the root of the place names. And you know, he was very much helped in that process by Canon Power, who published this book, The Place Names of the Dacia, in 1907. And again, the output of that is it's a legacy in the report for the farmers and their families. And because Michael gave the talk in Ballymacarbery Community Centre on the geography of the uplands. So we had that community engagement there as well. Kind of sticking with the cultural element of the project, we had Hugh Carey from the National Monument Services, and he came down to us and he gave us a walk or introduced us to some of the monuments on Comeragh. Now, we didn't do them all because there are 111. Comeragh is the first place people settled on the Comeraghs. And Hugh also gave a talk to the local community in the Rathgormack Community Hall. And I just want to mention that we had 2 other speakers who gave talks. One on the birth and death of clustered villages on the Comeragh Mountains. These were villages when people moved onto the Comeragh Mountains at the end of the 18th century, early 19th century, and lived and worked on the mountain. And their death in the early 1900s. And then we had Sean and Sheila Murphy, another 2 local historians, and they talked about the folklore on the mountain. So going back to the monuments, as I said, the monuments are the first records we have of activities on the Comeragh Mountains, dating back to about 4000. It's kind of interesting that those first settlers were hunter-gatherers, right? But then to improve food security, they started to domesticate animals and grow crops. So in some ways, that tradition and definition of the farmers on the mountain of who they are and what they are has the roots back to those early settlers 6,000 years ago. And that root is relevant to the communities, the local communities that are living there. So in the report, right, we provide a resource. In other words, we have talk about what monuments are on the uplands. Some of them have very few. And like, as I say, Comeragh has over 100. That provides a legacy for the farmers and the family. And we garnered community engagement by the talk that Hugh gave. The next thing was rivers and streams. They're a very important part of the upland ecosystem. And we had, again, walking and talking. Philip Murphy of Lawpro and Cathal Summers of ASAP did the walk with us. And Fran Igo spoke about the rivers and lakes on the Comeraghs and told us a good story about the Arctic char, the fate of the Arctic char in Coomshannon Lake. When Philip and Cathal brought us up the mountain, Philip showed the farmers how he takes a kick sample and how he uses it to assess the quality of the water there. Cathal discussed some of the issues of where upland farming can impact on water quality, like erosion leading to sediment getting washed in, or burning leading to burnt ash getting come in, dealing with sheep dip, and supplementary feeding. So again, what we were doing here, we was trying to grow the knowledge of the farmer. We provided in this report, which Philip provided us with a little summary of the river and their current status in terms of quality. And we provided appendices in there on best practices. And again, the talk meant that we had community engagement. The next section in the report are the bird and mammal survey and the Comeragh birds and mammals and plants. So our ecologists in Oakwin, they were with us all through the project, our partners, and they conducted a snapshot of the birds and mammals. And so you may ask why, but it was this question that the farmers raised very early on. So they did that for us, and they produced a little report on each of the 9 uplands that they think, and identified where the birds and the mammals were identified on it. And then we moved on from that to the next section, which was in the report on the common Comeragh birds, mammals and plants. So here Oakwin was joined by Helen Lawless and Mountaineering Ireland, and we put together this section in the report where we had a picture of the bird, the plant or the mammal, and a little description. And this is within the report, a resource for the farmers and the families. But we went a little bit beyond it in that, in terms of community engagement, Helen is working furiously at the moment to finish off this Walking with Wildlife brochure, which is an insight to the key flora, fauna of the Comeragh Mountains. And this will be available for hill walkers and locals, and kind of brings that habitat biodiversity to the wider public and the good on the mountain. And we hope to launch that in early August. Some of us in the project were lucky enough to take part in the Burn Bio Heritage Keepers training. And one of the outcomes of that for us was that we put together posters on the birds, the fauna, and the plants for schools. And we distributed them to the 6 primary schools just before they closed in June. The next section that we dealt with in the report, this was flock management. And what we did was we asked the farmers we gave them a bit of a structure there, asked them to kind of describe their upland management. So what we have got now in the report is a snapshot or a record of their upland management. And again, by writing this themselves, they didn't get anybody else to write it, they wrote it. And it's part of a legacy too in the report. And I'm just going to take a little sidestep here to say a few words about grazing management. If we look at grazing management for habitat, there is guidance out there, right? And it's about stocking rate. And when we looked at the information insofar as we could that we got from the flock management reports, we were able to say our farmers were in general within it. Particularly for our upland farmers, were within the limits. There was no exceeding of them. But then in most things, when it comes to upland, I contact Declan Byrne of the Suez project to get myself head straightened. And when I was talking to him about it, Declan came up with the 4 hours of grazing, which I think is an interesting and useful way of looking at grazing. It's not only about stocking rate, that's the right number of stock. It's also about the right type of stock. It's also about grazing the right upland areas, and it's also about grazing them at the right time of the years. So I think that there is a need to develop the evidence base to underpin that and to expand it to take account of the other grazing management. And there are special challenges in doing this compared with lowland farmers, because on commonages where we've multiple shareholders, keeping, when you talk about keeping sheep on the right area of the upland, that can be quite difficult. So there are particular challenges there, and I certainly think there's a need to do some more, or there's a need for new work on that. When we talk about the Comeragh Mountain habitats, Catherina mentioned there that there was some awareness, right, among the farmers about the background. So we put in a chapter in here, and we were helped by Enda Mullen of National Parks and Wildlife on the background to the Habitat Directive, the Comeragh report, the Comeragh Mountain report that Catherina mentioned, the Comeragh Mountain Conservation Objectives. And again, in the report, this is supporting material for the farmer. And it's clear we need more conversations around that. moving on to the main area, which was the habitat training that we did. And the training was walk and talk, and lots of walk and talking, and then some. So the first thing that Julie Larkin, our ecologist, did was brought the farmers up and introduced them to some of the habitats on the mountain. And she did 2 of those walks, but this was a very interesting comment after the first one from one of the farmers who said, this is the first time I've ever walked on the mountain and looked down at what I was walking on. It's a very telling comment in 2021 when we're talking 2021 when we did those walks. And then when Julie went up to assess the uplands and the commonages, she was accompanied by the farmers, and showed them how she assesses them, and there was great learning, walking and talking going on in that. And then Julie provided the results and a little report on the potential actions, right? And, again, what we were doing here was growing the farmers' knowledge. And you might be interested in some of the kind of comments from Julie's report, from the 10 report, trying to summarize here. She mentioned reducing grazing pressure in 9 of the 10 reports. Now, it's important to say that this was only on small areas of the commonage. It wasn't overall the whole it wasn't on the commonage, it was areas within it. There was bracken control on 6 uplands, primarily on dry heath. Purple moor grass control on wet heath on 6 reports. Restoring wet heath on 4. Scrub removal on 2. There was burning noticed happening on 2 uplands on wet heath. Reduced burning frequency, and there was on 1 upland concern about soil erosion. And again, our discussions around these was about growing the farmers' knowledge. We know the new acre scheme is coming on board, and there's going to be results-based payment and scorecards. So again, Julie brought the farmers out and showed them how the scoring card works in different habitats. Again, this was part of growing the knowledge. The next section in the report was where we had this discussion with the farmers and the shareholders about their responses to the actions. And that section of the report kind of summarizes the response of the individual farmer or shareholder, but it also includes several appendices on grazing management, prescribed burning, bracken and fern control. And again, this was the whole process of talking was growing knowledge, and the report was providing the supporting material. And you might be kind of interested in some of the responses to the suggested habitat actions that Julie had made. So the question was, in these small areas, right, where Julie wanted the stocking rate reduced, or the grazing pressure, not stocking rate, grazing pressure reduced, how do you do it? When we mentioned about using cattle grazing to control bracken or purple moor grass, wasn't received initially very well, even though in the introduction, some farmers described remembering back in the 40s having cattle grazing on the uplands. Controlling bracken, that was a big challenged on some, right? But it was interesting, there was one upland that bracken was just beginning to get in on, and like they were in the lucky position that they could control it and actually plan to control it for stopping in. But there are other commonages where, there's up to 20% of the commonage covered in bracken. So they found that very challenging. Bog restoration, I suppose the funny thing there was when we mentioned that, somebody said, bring back the helicopter, that we're going to deal with that, or to deal with that. The next thing, and the final bit of the training, was prescribed burning. We had a talk and demo, and we're very grateful to Kieran Nugent from DAFM and John Casey, who provided the training. And, an interesting thing about the demo was, this is us up on the hill in February on the day we were scheduled to do the burn, and all ready to go. But John reckoned conditions weren't right to do it, so we didn't actually get to do the demo. And I suppose it highlights the difficulty upland farmers face with burning in the open season for burning And again, what we saw here was that we're growing the farmers' knowledge. And what we did is we worked with the farmers and produced an upland draft prescribed burning plan for them that they can use in the future. The other project activities, Tuesday Tea Talks, these were for the community engagement. I've mentioned those already. They were very successful, and the communities got into the spirit by bringing in school bands and choirs to sing to us. Farm visits, we did a number of these farm visits from the schools. This was part of the heritage keepers training, the outcome from that, and it was really successful. You want to see the farmers running those days. They ran them. They wanted to tell the school kids about their mountain and what they were doing on the mountain. And like what came across in the responses that we got from the teachers was the passion and the pride that the farmers had. And the sheepdog trials were very popular with those farm visits. And then finally, we had these site visits. Catriona mentioned we went to Glenwerry, where we met Brian Irvine, who gave us a great initial insight into the new ecosystem services like carbon sequestration and the work that he is doing, that water control and that. And again, this was about growing knowledge, community engagement here, and those community engagements I felt really empowered the farmers. So nearly at the end now, our project, we're preparing farmers to take ownership and engage in delivering biodiversity and habitats. They put in 25 days into this training program and working with us on learning with us during the program. So how did it go for them? We got Anita Upton from Teagasc Owen, she's a sociologist, to assess the knowledge. And here are her preliminary results. The farmers acquired new skills, right, through the project engagement activities that I've been talking to you about. They really liked the learning by doing with the experts on the mountain. And one thing that really came across to Anita was that it was a conversation. It was that they felt, and particularly with the ecologist Julie, that she listened to them. She wasn't telling them. There was that exchange, and that worked very well. And that's what I mentioned there about the school visits and the community, or the school visits to the farms. That was very empowering for the farmers. They really got a lot out of it, and the community got something out of it. And then they were very pleased with the kind of impact, you know, the kind of discussion on the traditions, the history, the place names, and the local farming practices, and that there's a record there for them in the future. So just to finish up, our approach may provide a template for future farming upland training course, which I believe are definitely a necessity going forward. We increased the knowledge of the farmers, greater awareness and ownership. I think we achieved that. And our engagement with the rural communities were worthwhile and rewarding and empowering for the farmers. And then some of the issues, right, that are arising, we must continue more and better communication, more evidence to underpin the actions to deliver multifunctional outcomes. We need to talk about the targets and management options for some habitats, some of those which are in unfavorably bad condition, and possibly others. There is a need to develop a national integrated upland research and knowledge transfer and demonstration program where we can bring farmers to show them the impact of the management. And then at the end, we know there's a new round of EIPs, and we should be considering what role can they play in maybe addressing some of these issues. They won't address them all, but they may provide some output. So just to say thanks to all the people, those 34 people and our farmer group who made the project work as a great learning experience. And we did have a bit of crack along the way. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Owen. Excuse me. A huge amount of food for thought. A reminder to people to post your questions in the Q&A section. It strikes me, I suppose we, over the last number of years, and I suppose Catherine and I have been involved in discussions on how we try and achieve through various schemes improvements in uplands. And a lot of money is moving in one way or another into those areas, but it's beginning to sound to me like we have forgotten the magic ingredient, and that's the people that are there. And in terms of the supporting and resourcing of the people, the building of a pride of place, and those are some of the things that you seem to have, I suppose, tackled in this project to great effect.
I think that's right, Pat, and you put it very well. Like, I think our thought was great schemes out there, you know, focused on improving the uplands, but they take time, right? And what we said at the beginning was, if we could change and help the farmer and focus our attention on the farmer, build his knowledge of it so that he's able to take on the actions and implement them, that we might get a better bang for our buck. So one of the kind of things that we've been talking about, maybe in future ACMs or future schemes, maybe not the acres coming up, but education and training would be an essential part of it, right? Or an important part of it, to build a confidence. And like, we saw that in the farmers. I don't know, Cathriona, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, and I suppose one part of the project with the farmers was it actually gave the opportunity to the farmers to show off their hills. You know, there was a lot of external people coming on, and I suppose we look at agriculture and we think of the nice cattle, they're after putting on loads of weight, or the dairy cow, God, she's producing loads of milk. But I mean, we have to enable farmers to be able to look at the environment that way and produce their habitats like that as well.
Okay, Catherine, a number of questions coming in.
Yeah, very complimentary, but you'll probably mention that at the end. It would be interesting to hear from Owen and Cathriona in relation to lessons learned for this project for acres. And as we know, that's right up on us. But what changes to existing advisory approaches and new advisory skills, if any, are needed for its successful implementation by the advisory services? So is there anything we can learn short term and maybe then longer term as well?
So I suppose the biggest thing about schemes is it's very hard to get everything to fit into this one scheme. One thing about the mountains in this project, and I'd say it's the same for mountains all across Ireland, they're all very different, and then all the farmers within them are very different. And the way they farm it as well is completely different to how they have worked their lowland, how much lowland they have, what other enterprises are going on. So you really need to look in really closely on the individual, on the farmer, and then go out on the mountain and kind of see what's going on. The other thing then I suppose about schemes is the one-day training program, and I've done many of them over the years between REPS, GLAS and AUS. I don't know how you get the training across in a one short day. It's very hard to engage at that level. Time as well then in schemes, I mean, they're paying for a service to get into the scheme, and time is money. But I mean, to do things right, to get good engagement from the farmer, to learn everything that's going on, the advisor has to give that time. So I don't have any real answer. I just have a lot of questions. I think acres is certainly part of the solution, and I'm really interested to see what's going to happen with the cooperation project and what options are going to come there.
Yeah, and just to add, sorry, Catherine, just to add to that, I suppose the question was, what are the lessons? Well, like, I think one of the lessons that we feel is, if the new schemes cooperate, invest in time in training, that I believe, based on the evidence that we got from the training that we put in, there's a very good return on that. both in terms of the investment, in terms of return on the money invested in the training, and in terms of the skills of the farmers who are going to implement the actions going up. They know why they're going up, they know what they're going to do, they know why they're doing it, and that's a big help. They take ownership, and I think, you know, so that would be, I think, incorporation of training. And I just pick up on the point that Cathriona made there, is that training, you know, is around the country. So there's great opportunities for the new technical universities and Teagasc to offer these training courses built around that conversations, communications, and time.
So I suppose a question that strikes me from the description of what you have, I suppose, broadly classified as training, it strikes me as being a good bit more than that, and the engagement of, say, a lot of professionals from NPWS and other organizations with the farmers seems to be part of it. So it goes, to me, it strikes me you went a long way beyond the normal kind of training with an individual trainer. You went into a holistic approach of bringing the farmers and a lot of the professionals who are working in this area together. How important was that, and can that be replicated in what I might describe as a traditional training course, or is it something that we need to actually build into the process?
I don't know. I feel it was really important because, like, when you're dealing with the uplands, it's multifaceted, right? You know, there's not all the information doesn't reside, and that it's that cooperative approach, right? I think, you know, that's what we need, is the different agencies talking to each other, the different experts getting together. And again, what we picked up in our project was the way they engage with the farmers, right? You know, that they talked to them. The farmers often said that, "Oh, you're not talking down to us, you're talking to us, you're listening to us, and you're getting, you know, what the EIPs were brought in to do, which was create a better balance between the top-down approach and the bottom-up approach." So I take your point about the training. Maybe that's not the word. Maybe it's capacity building is what the words that I should be using, because you're right. It's beyond training within those pillars of not treating biodiversity as a single. It's a whole mountain, right? There's a whole lot of things happening up on that mountain, and we're bringing them together. And the other thing that's, you know, again, going back to Brendan Dunford, which kind of always stuck with me, you know, that helps bring the hearts and minds of the, you know, when you know what you're trying to do, you know, when you know why you're doing it, then I think you can actually deliver those rather than kind of not be sure about what's happening. Sorry, I don't mean to ramble.
Yeah, no, and I suppose, and I'll shut up then, and Catherine knows on you, but I suppose one of the senses you get from the uplands generally is a sense of pessimism about the role of farmers, the age profile, the demography, and I suppose one of the questions, and it might be difficult to answer, but did you get a sense that when you engage with farmers in this way, you get more of an optimism about what the potential is of the uplands, or is it too early to say that?
No, I don't think it's too early at all. And the biggest, you know, one of the big outcomes that Anita picked up was how the engagement with the rural community empowered them, right? And when the school children visited and came back with their comments about how passionate they were, right? It really, you know, they felt that they were listened to, they felt that the community understood, and it gave them great hope for the future. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I think that they felt now, okay, we only could make small efforts in the size of our project, but they felt now the community is with us. And this moved that pessimism away to optimism, with the idea that there are new potential sources of income coming down the line. I don't know, Cathriona, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, and I suppose there's one thing that I just want to link back, I suppose, to the training, and that's the word exposure. You mentioned Brendan Dunford there, Owen, And that's one of the things that stuck in my head, that we had Brendan talking to the farmers at one of the tea talks, and they were absolutely blown away by him after the tea talk when I was talking to them. They were saying they had never heard anything like that before. And I was saying back, well, were you not reading about that project in the paper? Did you not know about it? And they were like, yeah, we knew about it. We knew something was going on, but it's not what they're drawn to in a paper. But when they saw him up there talking to them in a smallish group, there was probably maybe about 40, there was the farmers and the community were there as well, about 40 people. He really, really connected to them, like, and they don't get exposure to that kind of thing a lot, you know? So that's just one word I'd like to link back to the project.
Okay, Catherine.
Yeah, and I just on my own side, Pat, I suppose this was an example of training and the power of the discussion group. So it's some kind of a cross between formal training and the use of the discussion group, which we're in lowland agriculture are very familiar with, but has never been used in the uplands, although we are trialing that in the Wild Atlantic Nature. The question about, is the final report available to the general public?
We have to be very careful about that, because they're very personal. There are details there, particularly under the flock management. But yes, and I know you'll make sure we deliver those. But I just want to go back to something you said there about the training, the discussion group, because it's important to link it into the SUAS project and the development of the commonage groups there as an approach that Declan and SUAS have pioneered. And what I'd be saying is, yes, the groups work, but I think an important thing to realize is our group is a mature group. They're used to working together, and they're functioning very well. So yes, I think that group, and maybe even building it into the commonage group, if that's something that goes forward, is a good approach.
Just a comment from a farmer about having farmer on the commonage for the summer, but would need virtual fencing to get the benefit of them. But we won't maybe dwell on that. Just a comment. I suppose from the farmer's point of view is, what do you see as the biggest message and opportunity for upland farmers to protect the uplands? What's the best opportunity for them to protect our uplands?
Well, I don't know. I might step out a line here and maybe say learning about them, right? Like that. When they know about them, then they know what they can do about them. And like as Catriona said there about when Brendan was up talking to us, right? They kind of knew about it, but didn't know about it. And it wasn't until they actually saw it up close and personal, right, that they actually engaged with it. Does that make sense, or does it answer your question?
Yeah. And is there any plan for ongoing assistance and monitoring, specifically on the Comeraghs?
Go ahead, Catriona.
Yeah, well, the discussion group is going to stay going, and we have been we basically stopped all focus on production for the last year while this project was going on. So we're going back looking at production, but I've already had the discussion with the farmers, and we have said we'll definitely be doing an environmental topic at every meeting or every second meeting. We certainly won't let what we've done so far go, and sure, we might try and do something similar again. I don't know how we would do something similar, but what the next step would be, but we might look at it. We'll see.
Okay. There may be a further opportunity in the new EIPs, but we'll have to wait and see. But I think the main message is that what we did worked, and it should be considered. It's be out there. We're not saying we're entirely right, but it is an idea that seemed to work for us in the Comeragh. And
just a question for Catriona about the importance of talking about the production and the environment together at the same time, you just brought it up there because you mentioned you may do it at every meeting. Is that important rather than segregating it?
Well, I think so. I mean, I was a reps planner for years, and I've worked in the environmental schemes for years, and even at the groups before, we would do a little bit of work and I'd say, I'm taking off my production hat now and I'm putting on my environmental hat, like segregating them. But the environment tends to be linked back to the schemes nearly all the time. It needs to be linked more in production, because they are all linked. Like if the habitat isn't functioning right, if there's problems, that will mess up the production eventually. We might be a long time before we see it, but it will happen. So focus on everything as a big group together needs to be done more, I think.
Yeah, really great talk and discussion. Couldn't agree more that the crucial issue is people talking openly and respectfully to each other to identify what's being done, what the impacts are, what can be done practically to improve negative impacts. Supporting, yeah, that's okay. Is Acres Cooperation Project not the next step for this group?
Probably will be for most of them. It's up to themselves, you know, it's a voluntarily scheme, so it'll be up to the individual whether they want to go in or not, but I would assume a vast majority of them would.
And I you know, they're going to go into that scheme in good condition, like they're prepared for it a little bit better than if there wasn't, you know. So, and I think they'll be able to contribute to the scheme and its evolution over time in terms of what's going on and what measures they decide to implement.
And Pat, just before we finish, maybe I didn't say it at the beginning, but this is part of a 4-week series. We had Catriona Douglas last week giving us kind of the opening about the condition of the uplands, and next week we have the Wild Plant in Nature, Derek McLaughlin, and we have Killian Kelly talking, just going back to that man's comment about the cattle on the uplands. So I think, yeah, so just to remind everybody, it's the 4-week focus, and they will all be available on the website afterwards.
Okay. And I suppose one of the questions there is provision for an increased level of EIPs in the next phase of the CAP strategic plan. Are you planning to extend this into maybe a longer term project, or is too early to say that? Or
We'll get this one finished first anyway.
Okay. Okay. Yeah,
before we start again.
Okay. Oh, listen, I think from the comments coming in, there's an absolutely huge appreciation for the presentation you've given this morning, but I think also for the work that you have taken on. Catriona, I think in terms of taking on something like this, along with the busy role of that you have in what you might describe as the day job. I mean, a lot of this I suspect is extra effort. So huge congratulations in terms of the learning that there has been in this in a very short space of time, and the potential example it sets, I think, for and potential direction for what needs to
it does go back to the farmers. Like, if I didn't see it in them that they wanted this, it would never have happened. And
Owen, again, bringing, I think, your inimitable skills to bear in terms of I suppose understanding issues and bringing a project forward. I think that a huge amount of
we you know, it was great, and like the farmers we worked with were great, the communities we worked with were great, and like, as I said, we had a bit of crack as we went along. You know, it wasn't, you know, it was good. So thank you.
And I suppose a final comment is, I think in the uplands, if we don't deal with the human aspect, we're never going to deal with it by trying to deal with it without bringing along the people. So thank you very much for your presentation. And just to say thanks to our production team of Yvonne Mar and Andy Boland. And until next week, hopefully we'll see you all again. Thanks very much. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks.